All right, so welcome everyone to our mini mock this evening. So this is the first of, I guess, our season series of mini mocks over the next season leading up to the September GAMSAT. So very exciting to kick it off with all of you here tonight. And thanks so much for coming along or for watching the recording if you're joining us afterwards. So before we begin, I'd just like to give an acknowledgement to country and pay my respects to the traditional and rightful owners of the land. For me, I live and work on the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to them and to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to anyone joining us who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So, as I mentioned, welcome to our mini mock. Just before we begin, hopefully you're all in the right place. You've come to join our mini mock for the GAMSAT. But those who don't know us, haven't heard of Halad before, we're a not-for-profit that runs what we're proud to say is Australia's most affordable GAMSAT tuition. But the more exciting part for us is that it has a social impact involved. And that is that all of our students who come through Halad, they either come and then volunteer on our impact missions over in the Philippines, or even just tuition fees that you might sign up for and pay, or even if you make a donation for our ebook, or even to coming here tonight, it helps us make an impact in the Philippines, which is all about giving back to communities that have less health literacy than we're blessed to have. And so we run missions over in the Philippines and teach students and help them to improve their understanding of healthcare and of how to create greater health literacy in their communities. And so since we started these courses last year, we've raised over $20,000 by people studying with us and taking part in our GAMSAT courses and being able to teach over 2,500 students. So basically, that comes down to us just being really proud of what we do and really grateful for everyone who comes along and wants to learn with us. And really, we just want to see you succeed. We want to see you make the most of your journey to medical school or to dentistry. And so we have a group of tutors here tonight to help you out with that. So my name is Sarah. I run the GAMSAT and med entry programs at Halad to Health and have for the past about 18 months. And basically have seen this grow from the ground up, and I'm very grateful to do what I do. I am currently in my 4th year of medicine, although I am taking a year off at the moment. So have seen a lot of students just like all of you get in and sort of walk this journey as well. Tonight, I'll be taking a bit of a backseat and running all of the back end things, but also more than happy to answer any questions anyone has. Molly will be running section 1 tonight. Molly is in her 1st year of medicine at UniMelb, very exciting, and was one of our GAMSAT students not too long ago last year and works with us on the ops team at Halad as well. And Jasmine will be doing section 2, and she is also in her 1st year of medicine at Monash. And Kevin will be running section 3, and he's in his 2nd year at UniMelb. So we've got some very well-seasoned, very well-educated tutors to help you out tonight, and feel free to ask them all your questions in the chat as you go. So with that being said, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about, yes, our GAMSAT philosophy and also just how tonight will run. So as I mentioned, the bigger picture for us, it's not just about you doing well in the GAMSAT. It's not just about you smashing out this exam because you have to. It's about helping you to become the best medical professional, the best healthcare professional you can be, and just helping you to be happy with the goals that you achieve in your life. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we want to help you to do. And hopefully this session can be a starting block for you with that. So tonight, what we're going to be doing is running a mini exam, so you can get a little bit of a taster for what sitting a mock exam might be like, but also get a little bit of dipping your toes in the water of trying some GAMSAT questions. Maybe this is the first time you've ever sat a GAMSAT style exam before. And so we'll run sort of the sections split up. So the first thing we'll do is you'll have 15 minutes to sit 10 section 1 style questions. Then Molly will go through some section 1 sort of tips and also go through the questions with you. Section 2 will be done by Jasmine, and we'll go over a little bit more when we do that, what you'll be expected to do. And then section 3 will be very similar to section 1. You'll do 10 questions, and then Kevin will go over some explanations and some tips for you as well. So like I mentioned, feel free to put your questions in the chat as you go. If you haven't done any of this before, don't worry, we'll help you out. And all you need to do is when I send you out the links in the chat, just click on the link, have a go at the question. It's okay if you have absolutely no idea, and then we'll go through it with you after you've given it a try. So what I'm going to do first is ask you a little bit of a poll. Can all of you see that? Can you see it, Kevin? Yes. Okay, terrific.
Yeah, I can see it.
Amazing. And while you're doing that, I'm going to swap out my screen share and I will find the links that you need to get started. Okay, great. So it looks like most of you, so 80% of you, have not been to a Halad event before. So welcome, so excited to have you. And that 80% of you also have not sat the GAMSAT before. So with that in mind, I'll give you a little bit of a heads up before we start each of the sections. So in the chat here, I've put some links. The first link, if you open that one up, it will have the actual questions that you're going to be doing. For section 1, you'll get a sort of collection of texts. They could be anything, and you're going to answer questions about the texts. So the second link that I've put in is the form for you to put what answers you came up with. That's literally all you have to do. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do it. So I'll put a timer up on my screen in a second, and then we can go from there. So if those links are good and you're good to go, can I just get a thumbs up or just say yes in the chat, and then we'll start. Terrific. Amazing, amazing. Cool, cool. All right, sounds good. So I'll just make sure, try and make my timer fit. Nice, full screen. That's pretty good. All right, and you can begin. Okay, great. So I'm going to pass it over to Molly now, and she's going to walk through some of the questions with you. If you have any, please put them in the chat, but also just letting you know that after tonight, because with each of the sections, we probably won't get time to go through every question. After tonight, we'll send you the explanations to everything. Cool, Molly.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So I'm just going to share my copy of the back end of what you guys essentially just submitted so that you can all see. Hopefully that is working. Please let me know if it's not. Okay, great. So I watched this section change so many times as people submitted their answers, but I thought it might just be worth going through some of the questions that were frequently missed. So just in case you were curious, the average was just over 5 out of 10, the median was around 5, and the highest mark was 7, with the lowest being 4. All right, so I thought we'd do something a little bit unorthodox and go from bottom up. So let's talk about question 10 first. Sorry, just have to get my clock up so I can keep an eye on the time. Yeah, looks good. So question 10. So this one was just to talk about the actual STEM for a moment. This kind of question was a bit of like a vocab detechnicalization STEM. So pretty much they gave you 2 different words and they gave you a definition for each of them as well. So you had to not only understand each of them, but also kind of start thinking about what were the links between them. Why have they chosen these particular sets of words and placed them together for you? So I think most people were okay with question 9. So we'll just jump directly to question 10. So this was essentially testing you about the relationship between enclothed cognition and embodied cognition. So very, very similar sounding terms, but you were really required to essentially form an understanding of both terms exclusively and kind of separate from each other, and then come together and work out whether or not there was actually a relationship here. So that was essentially what the question was trying to get at. So in terms of the answer here was D. So they do have intersections, but they are not subsets of one another. So something that we talk about in our classes is essentially trying to identify whether or not you need to look for evidence or whether or not you have to extrapolate from the text. So in this situation, you would have had to apply a little bit of extrapolation. So based on your understanding and the definitions provided here, you'd have to essentially try and work out what the relationship was, and if so, if there was one to begin with. So the reason why it's D is that it's because both definitions are essentially trying to talk about the feeling that you get. So for the first one, enclothed cognition, it's the feeling of clothes, the feeling that you get when you wear them, when you pick different clothes, and essentially that kind of how it tunes into your human psyche and how it makes you feel. Whereas the second one here was talking about how the kind of physicality of your body also can influence how you feel and influence your overall state of mind. Okay, sorry, I just got some feedback to see if I can share the questions side by side. Give me 2 ticks and I will try and do that now. Side thing, so we can get the questions up to the side as well. Okay. Oh my God. All right, that's going to be as good as it gets for now.
It's all good.
Right,
Thanks, Mel.
cool. No problem at all. So question 10, the reason why that they're not mutually exclusive is because that sometimes there's an overlap between essentially the clothes you wear and how they make you feel and how your body feels wearing certain clothes. So that's why it's not A, mutually exclusive. And then B and C, it's not, there's nothing in the STEM here that kind of gives you evidence that they are subsets of one another. And I think this is a classic case of not trying to overthink the question, because if you read too much into it, you'll start finding these links that don't exist between the two. And you might think that, oh, one is a subset of another. So no, whilst there are similarities and whilst they do overlap in some sense, so they have intersections, they're definitely not subsets of one another. And that's why the answer is D here and not A, B, or C. Okay, let's go back to this one here now. So let's talk about question 8. So according to the opinions displayed by the counsellor in the text, which of the following is the counsellor most likely to recommend to the patient? So the important thing here is, and just to take a step back for anyone who's sitting the GAMSAT for the first time, this is a very kind of tried and tested classic GAMSAT type of question, a cartoon with a small caption underneath it. And you not only have to pay attention to all the fine details here, but you need to read the caption in the context of the overall picture and STEM. So if you read the caption, you also looked at this kind of healthcare setting that you find both the counsellor and the patient in. And the STEM is essentially talking about this idea of how everything is quite materialistic, things about real estate, increasing your net worth, increasing properties and buying a lot of properties, and really kind of taking advantage of that capitalist mindset. So just based on the caption and the counsellors kind of writing notes and giving advice to the patient, you could plausibly come to the conclusion that the counsellor is most likely going to recommend that the patient does something that has something to do with money and how he might be able to increase the value of his real estate or to increase the amount of properties that he has. So that's why D is the most appropriate answer in this case. I'll just shuffle this over so you can see how many people actually chose D as an answer. So 4 people did out of 12. Okay, let's go up to the first unit here. So we'll obviously go from top bottom, otherwise it won't make that much sense. So in terms of this particular text, this is a fiction text, and it's pretty much quite a long piece of text as well. Something that's common in the GAMSAT these days is they'll just give you kind of 30 lines of text and they'll be like, here, go read and answer questions. So you should get used to kind of being able to digest a lot of content in a really kind of fast and efficient manner. So question 1, what is the story really about? So it's really important here to kind of take a big picture view when it comes to this particular text. So this is the fiction text, yes, and it's pretty much telling a story about something. And there's almost kind of like a shift in tone from the first half of this text to the latter half. And if you had essentially zoomed in on one section or one portion of this particular text, you would have gone down the wrong path and ended up with the wrong answer here. So the answer to this one is D. It's a story about a child trying to understand mental illness and death. And the reason why it's not any of the other ones, so I know it's really tempting to choose A, and I think a lot of students did choose A on this instance, but the reason why it's D is that it offers a bigger, broader view of what the entire piece of text is trying to say. So up here, the protagonist here, the narrator, is trying to deal with the death of his mother by suicide, and he kind of changes gears halfway through and starts reflecting upon this experience that he first had with death back when he was 7 years old. So that was through the death of his family, of the family dog. And it's through that first kind of death of his dog that was his first experience with mental health and with this concept of death as well. And now he's kind of thinking back to that occasion and how it kind of preempted or kind of made him reflect on how he's dealing with his own mother's death now. So essentially it's kind of taking the point of view from a child's lens and kind of showing to the reader how a child might view and perceive mental illness and death through this idea of like the story of the family dog dying. Okay. Right, number 2, what is the significance of the brilliant things? So at the very start of this text, the author lists a couple of different things that he thinks are brilliant, and he thinks that these things are something worth living for. So if you were able to pick up the context of this entire piece of text and understand that the narrator was trying to process his mother's death by suicide, then it would have led you to choosing option C as the correct answer. So the brilliant things are essentially the child's way of combating his mother's depression and mental illness. So he's making a list of all the good things in life that are worth staying alive for. Okay, number 4. So what is the main purpose of the protagonist sharing his story? So the answer to this one was C, to share how his life was affected by mental illness as a young boy. So this is a very kind of classic GAMSAT question once again. So trying to get you to essentially work out what the overall message of this piece of text was. And once again, if you kind of zoom in too much, you'll miss the point, and it's really easy to do so. But essentially the whole kind of text is kind of pushing you into the direction of understanding how, you know, he moved from this experience that he had as a young boy to where he is at right now. The list on the 9th of November 1987, that was when his mom was in hospital for perhaps mental illness. So it's kind of like a timeline of events, right? So it started off as a young boy, and now he's talking about essentially how that initial experience when he was younger has shaped his life today and shaped how he perceives things and how he views those brilliant things in life. And also perhaps leading into that kind of nature and dynamic of his relationship with his mother too. Cool. So I'm going to stop there. Does anyone have any kind of other questions or stems that they'd like me to quickly go over? Okay, great. Let me hand over to you now, Sarah.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Molly. Firstly, if you do have questions for Molly, or if you are trying this at home and watching the recording, you're welcome to send an email to either me and or Molly. Our emails are on the first slide, one of the first slides I showed, and I'll also show them again at the end. Just one thing I'm going to put in the chat, and it will be in the description box of the recording, are the predictive scores for this set of questions. Don't stress too much about these. Just some students like them, they find them helpful, they find them relatively indicative, but you're right at the start of this season. So I wouldn't stress too much if you, or even if you don't really know what it means. I'm not going to explain all of that now, but definitely if you have no idea what this score thing means, there's heaps online where you can go, what does a GAMSAT score actually mean, and get some information on that. So because a lot of you here, this is your first GAMSAT sitting, I'm going to show you what you're going to be doing for the next task rather than just throwing you into it. I'll share my screen. I'll give you a link in a moment that will take you to this document. And so for section 2, it's a little bit different to what you just did for section 1, where you had a list of questions based on the texts. Instead, you have a list of comments or quotes. You'll usually have 4 or 5, and you need to work out what the overall topic is that it's about and then write a piece based on that. Usually you'll write an essay, but you don't have to write an essay. Jasmine will go over more of that when she explains it, but we're going to give you 20 minutes. 20 minutes isn't enough time. Usually you'll have 65 minutes to do 2 of these back to back, so about 30 minutes each. So just give it a go. Either write as much as you can in those 20 minutes, or write a miniature version of an essay. So like an intro, maybe 1 body paragraph and a conclusion. Just have a go putting your ideas forward, and we'll go from there. So don't stress if it's not amazing. That's not what we're looking for. It's just really good for you to get some practice. So same deal, I'm going to put the links in the chat. And so the top one will have the prompts that I just showed you, and then the bottom one will be where we'd like you to submit what you write. And if you feel brave enough to tick yes, you're happy for us to potentially share yours afterwards, then Jasmine will go through one of yours as an example anonymously when you're all finished. And I'll tell you when you have 5 minutes to go. Are we going to get emailed these links? Yes, we'll email everything out to you afterwards as well. Cool. Thumbs up if we're all good to go. Or would be like, yep, in the chat. Terrific. Amazing. Cool, cool. All right, sounds like we're all good. I will just share the timer and you can start. Okay, so what I'll get you to do is finish writing whatever sentence you're on and just click submit on the form. I'm going to pass over to Jasmine now and she's going to run you through some section 2 things and a sample.
Alrighty, I'm just going to share my screen. All right, cool. Can everybody see that? You should be able to see the prompts. Cool. All right. So I just kind of want to start by saying good job for getting through section 2. I always find that section 2 is probably the hardest section early on in your preparation, because with section 1 and 3, you can kind of just take a guess at an answer, as with section 2, you actually need to write something. So it might be a little bit more challenging, but I can guarantee you once you get through it, it will be the most fun section out of all the sections, because you can just write whatever you want to write. So I'm just going to start by going through the prompts. I think whenever you see a set of prompts for a section 2 piece, the best thing to do is gaze over all of them and see if you can pick out any keywords or any key terms that can help link the prompts together. So in this case, the overall topic was philanthropy, but don't stress if you don't actually know what philanthropy means. You can kind of gauge what the topic is just by reading over the comments themselves. So for example, the first comment refers to, being able to give to those who may not be as fortunate as us. And then in your second comment, it mentions the word philanthropy, but even if that wasn't there, even if that bit wasn't there and it just said X is not about money, it's about feeling the pain of others and caring enough about their needs to help. It's kind of explaining how philanthropy, or whatever the topic you're talking about, is about giving back to others. So I think that whenever you do see comments that you don't necessarily know what the overall topic is, you can kind of get an idea just by reading over a few of the comments and seeing if they have anything in common. In saying that, this was actually quite a good example in that all the comments themselves linked and there wasn't really an outlying one. Sometimes you may get comments where one of the comments doesn't really match with the others, like it sort of has the word in it, but it doesn't actually match if you were just to take that comment itself. So it's really important to make sure you look at all the comments and try to get the overall topic in order to write an essay that actually addresses the prompt that they're looking at, as opposed to just reading the one comment and writing an essay on something that's completely irrelevant. Once you've kind of figured out what the topic is, it's always good to come up with some arguments. Whether you want to write a argumentative piece or a persuasive piece or a creative piece or a poem or whatever you're good at, and whatever you feel more comfortable with, it's completely up to you what you write. But it's really important that you do have some key ideas that you want to discuss, and they're very clear from the start what your essay is going to be about, and it's very clear that it links to the piece. So I'm not sure if Sarah's already added one. She has. So we've got a student sample that we can go through. I'll give you guys a bit of time to read it. We'll go through just sample 1 for now, and then if we have time, we can go through another one. If anybody has any questions about section 2 or essay writing or anything like that, feel free to pop them in the chat, because we do have a bit of time to go over anything you guys have questions about. But we'll have a read of sample 1, and then I'll give a bit of feedback. And if you guys have any pieces of feedback that you think might help this piece, or you think that was done well, feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute, and we can have a discussion about that as well. All right, someone just give me a thumbs up if they finish reading. I think I might be a quick reader, so I don't know if everybody else is also done. Okay, I got one thumbs up. Oh, a couple. All right, cool. Well, I'll start going through some of my feedback, but if you guys have any of your own, feel free to pop it in the chat. And if you want to send it to me privately, that's okay. I'm happy to read it out for you. I just want to start by saying that you guys only had 20 minutes, so don't expect to get a full essay out. However, this student's actually done quite a good job at having some clear ideas, and they've, I guess, accurately picked out the topic of philanthropy and giving back and all of those kinds of things. So this is actually a good example of, you know, making sure you stick to the topic and having some arguments that, I guess, flow with what you want to say. So within this first paragraph or the introduction, I think that the student's done a pretty good job at discussing what they feel about philanthropy or what they know about philanthropy and how what we have in society now has led us to this notion of giving back and helping those less fortunate. I think it goes well as an introduction. I'm not sure if this was meant to be a body paragraph or an intro. I think it's a really good introduction into the topic. And one thing, I guess, if you guys had more time, I would have really liked to have seen a bit more elaboration on, I guess, the more specifics about philanthropy and how they're embedded in society, and maybe some examples of where they can be seen, or specific companies that you know of that have, I guess, demonstrated these characteristics or something along those lines. So having a bit more of a discussion of the benefits of philanthropy and why it's necessary in society, and things like that. So kind of just showing more of your point of view, and adding a little bit more depth to what you've got to say about philanthropy. Then the student's gone in to kind of go against what they've previously said and sort of have a bit of a rebuttal. So although philanthropy is good, what is the problem with that? And I think that's a really good thing to show in a GAMSAT essay, that you are able to look at things from multiple points of view. You're not just narrow-minded about your one point of view and your one idea. It's really important that you show the examiners that you can think thoroughly about what, I guess, what your point of view is, but what other points of view in regards to this argument are as well. At the end of the day, whenever you are writing an essay, think to yourself about what characteristics would make a good healthcare professional. You want to have someone who is empathetic. You want to have someone who, you know, looks at things from your point of view and can see multiple perspectives on things and isn't just narrow-minded with the one idea. So showing those characteristics in your essays is really good and really important as well. Section 2 is really the only part of the GAMSAT where you get to show a little bit of yourself. So try to make the most of it and try to cater the piece that you write to you as much as possible. So in this portion here, the students discussed, I guess, what's going wrong with philanthropy, or how companies are sort of taking advantage of it and not necessarily doing what they aimed to do or what they should be put out to do. So I think that they've done a really good job there. I mean, obviously it's quite a small piece, but you guys only had 20 minutes and it's probably one of the first or earlier essays that you guys have written. But nonetheless, I think that they've done a really good job at showing multiple points of view in this essay, and having a look at, I guess, you know, two perspectives of philanthropy, not just how it's good, but also looking at the consequences or, you know, cases where it could be bad. Does anybody have any additional feedback that they wanted to add to this piece? Otherwise, I'm happy to move on to the second one if we've got time. We've got a couple of minutes. All good? All right, I might move on. Sarah, Molly, or even Kevin, do you guys have any feedback you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, would you like to go over sort of how you would finish this one off or wrap it up? And yeah, particularly that paragraph as well, how you would sort of round that out and where you take
this
it from
one?
there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So in terms of like coming to a conclusion in an overall GAMSAT essay, I think this kind of applies to most essays that you write, but try not to add any additional information into a conclusion. We see it all the time, and although, you know, it might sound great and it's a great addition to your piece or you've thought about it later on, I think it's really important that you kind of tie together everything you've said and potentially provide them with a direction that you think that this topic or this prompt or your opinion on this issue should go. So I guess in this case, the students had a look at how philanthropy is beneficial, or what its purpose is and what it was, I guess, made out to do. And then in this, I guess, second body paragraph sort of thing, they've discussed that, you know, not all companies have followed on with these things, and there are some complications. So in terms of closing off this paragraph, you could talk about the fact that, you know, although there are benefits, there are things that we need to consider within philanthropy and within these endeavors, that nothing is perfect. And although we are kind of trying to aim for that, we have to really consider that there are, you know, multiple things happening, and that it's, I guess, we're a long way from where we want to be. I hope that kind of makes sense. So in terms of concluding a paragraph, you really just want to tie up what's been said in that paragraph, but always link it back to your overall argument. So I guess if the main argument of this piece is that philanthropy is good, that's just a generalization and very short. You want to, I guess, link it back to you still believing that philanthropy is good. However, showing that you have thought about this from another perspective, because you don't want to just end this paragraph by saying, therefore philanthropy is bad, because that's going to go against what you've originally said. But you do still want to show that you've looked at it from another perspective, and that, I guess, you know, there are multiple points of view that you need to consider in these things. Someone's asked how you link the comments. So in terms of linking the comments, you don't actually need to, I guess, directly quote any of the comments themselves. You don't really even need to refer to the comments. The comments are kind of there to help you get an understanding of what the overall theme is. So as long as you can relate back to that theme itself, you're kind of already addressing the comments in a way. So don't feel like you have to directly talk about the comments themselves. You don't have to choose a specific comment. But I think by pulling out the topic of philanthropy or of giving back, you're getting the overall theme. And that's really enough to be able to address the section 2 piece. In terms of being too critical or too political, I think one of the key things to take away is that whenever you're saying something, think about, is there another perspective I should consider? So it's completely fine if you have certain points of views and certain perspectives on things, but in your essay, try not to be too one-sided on something. Try to show another side of the argument, or at least consider or show the readers that you have considered that there might be other parts to this issue that you may not be discussing. So I think it's really important that if you do want to be political or very critical about one thing, that you also look at the other side. So, you know, showing that you can have that reasoning of both perspectives. Yeah, you can definitely use all the comments. I think this is probably one where all the comments relate to each other quite well. Sometimes you might get things about love, for example, like the overarching topic is love, and then one of the comments talks about my love for pizza. If you talk about pizza, you're off topic. But if you refer to love, then you're on topic. That's a big generalization. You're not going to get a topic on pizza. But like, in terms of that, try to make sure that when you are addressing the topics or the comments, I wish to, if you are addressing the comments or the topics themselves, that you are looking at what the overall thing is, and what the main idea is, as opposed to addressing a specific comment and then going off track. Does anybody else have any other questions? Honestly, I'm not 100% certain. I think that, you know, you will be marked based on how well you're able to refer back to the prompt or the overarching theme that ASA has provided you with. So I don't really know exactly how they, you won't know exactly, I don't know how exactly they mark, but if you're getting 4 out of 5 of the concepts, you're probably pretty much there. Like if you go on to in your essay and your essay is about love, but you mention your own love for pizza, that's completely fine. As long as the essay is about love and not about pizza, like don't go on to talk about a pizza shop that you worked at that has nothing to do with you loving pizza. I hope that kind of makes sense. So like try to focus on the overall theme as opposed to the specifics of each comment, because you can get thrown in the opposite direction. I think everybody's different in terms of how they practice for section essays. I found that planning was really helpful at the start. When I wasn't able to get out a full piece, it helped me generate ideas for different prompts. It helped me practice breaking down the comments and trying to get an overarching theme out of them. So I think it just depends on what your weaknesses are. So mine were definitely coming up with ideas on the spot, and planning really helped with that. I also think it's a really good way to start, and then you can sort of, I guess, from those plans, start to write essays. Don't stress too much about the timing right now. You guys have so many months until the GAMSAT. So really just practice on honing out your ideas and what kind of arguments you want, as well as practicing different types of essays that you might want to write. You don't have to write argumentative. You might be really good at creative and not even know it. So I guess have a try of different things and practice, and then kind of see how you go. I might hand back over to Sarah. I think we're running over a little bit, but all good. I also have to leave, but Sarah will put my email at the end. Otherwise, I might just pop it straight into the chat now. And if anybody wants to send me an email, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
All
Thanks
good.
so much, Jasmine. Yes, I know I've just put in the chat. We ran a masterclass, I think it was about a year ago now, on how to pull apart prompts if you don't really know where to start with that, and also just how to start with section 2 in general if this is like your very first touch point with it. So don't stress about that. I'll send that out with the recording, and you'll all get that sent out after tonight's event. Thank you so much for coming along, Jasmine. And yes, please send her an email if you have any questions. I just wanted to also mention one other thing about being too critical or political or just controversial in general. I think the biggest sort of thing to ask yourself is, what did I want to get across with my essay? And if you're bringing across something highly political or controversial, is that tampering with you getting that across, or is that helping? If you're getting it across, then ask yourself, how do I sound? So if you sound overly critical or really one-sided or really overprivileged or something like that, then that's probably not appropriate. But it's not a flat out, you can never be political or never be controversial. So ask yourself, what do I want to get across and how do I want to sound? And if you're happy with meeting both of those things, then thumbs up, you're doing well. Just before we move on to section 3, we have one of our other section 2 markers who's joined us, Mark. So Mark, if you're free, pop your camera on or say hi. Hey.
Hey, sorry, I've just come back from work in the gym, so apologies, I'm not looking my best. But hey guys, so I'm a section 3 tutor coming for the up section and section 2 marker. And I was a bit bored at work, so I had a quick play around with these. So I might just share screen.
Yeah, Mark's just going to show you like an example plan that he came up with if you're not sure how to start. And
Yep.
if you could talk them through sort of how you came up with it, that'd be great.
Can you just see the Word document?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I look weird, I'm looking up at a second monitor, guys. So basically, yeah, I was one of Sarah's proteges back in the day. And yeah, pretty much, just got to add on to what Sarah said about being political. So my task A theme in the GAMSAT was on welfare, particularly like financial welfare. And I like to argue both sides of the political spectrum. I think it also makes the process fun, reading different media sources. And I did sort of argue in one of the parts a sort of a more right wing or like sort of, yeah, like probably not the kind of perspective that you would want to have overarching. But I argued basically that, you know, as much as welfare is a positive thing, it would be naive to think that it's not exploited. And I gave an example of working with a lot of people and rubbing shoulders with a lot of people who had exploited the JobKeeper, and basically, you know, use that as a, not the dominant part of my argument, but to throw balance to the argument of, okay, yes, welfare should be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing. And then it kind of lent on to what I would finish was like a solution to this problem. So I think it shows your ability to appreciate something, but also to show that you're a balanced person. And so what I've kind of done with, you'll see the way I just broke down the theme, I just wrote philanthropy, and then I kind of wrote the different perspectives of what each of the prompts said. So wealth versus caring, sharing resources, not losing sight of why it's necessary. And I would generally just like to write on the topic in general. I think a big thing for me, I wasn't probably a natural writer when I started the process, and that you've only got 30 minutes, right? So I was running out of time in both my essays and the exam day. So I just want to make life as easy as possible for myself. And yeah, here was the summary. Like, it's 5 different perspectives on philanthropy. And so what I like to do, I mean, I haven't touched an essay since I did the GAMSAT in September, October. So I would generally like to, when I was starting off, especially if it was a topic I wasn't super familiar with, was try to do a bit of research. So I read a few, skimmed through a few articles on a website called The Conversation, and just kind of try to think of, things that would interest me. So I generally would like to first thing to do a thesis, like what is the overall thing I'm trying to argue? Because I'm not maybe the world's most sophisticated writer. I come from a biomed background. I'm doing a PhD now. I'm probably not going to write the world's greatest think piece in half an hour. So as long as I know exactly what I want to write, that'll keep me in good stead, even as I get stressed. And so I just kind of, first thought I thought was, philanthropy on the surface is a very good thing. But yeah, kind of what one of the people wrote about how it leads itself to being exploited by companies. And then I thought maybe I could, to add, because I would like to add nuance to my essays, especially as I went further in towards my GAMSAT journey, sort of an exploration of, how we need to view philanthropy, and sort of talking about the importance of cynicism. And although that's a bit of a difficult balance to write, I feel like I got to the point where I would feel comfortable, walking that tightrope and writing, because I think it's also really important to find your voice and to write a unique essay that no one else will write. Like, I think that's one thing that, although maybe I lacked a little bit of polish compared to maybe art students, no one would ever see the world the same as me. And I think that if you read my writing, that would come through. So generally what I like to do with task A, they're socio-political topics, and I would generally like to do an argument in favor of something or an argument against it, or maybe a left and a right-wing perspective. So generally in favor of it. And I would like to generally have something, a piece of evidence or something that you could easily write on. So I like to use a lot of personal experience in mine, and I would talk about funding for medical research and about how philanthropy really allows medical research to flourish, particularly, and it allows innovation and risk taking that's not often there with government funding and the rigors of that. Then I wanted to talk about the downside, and this is where I thought I could really add nuance to it. So I did a little bit of reading, and I think it's probably, if you're just starting off, it's probably good to do 10 to 15 minutes of reading and find some interesting things. So I read an article about the Twitter co-founder, and he used a quote saying, "Philanthropy is the future of marketing." And although he meant this in a good way, what it does is it really captures this idea that philanthropy is being exploited by larger companies. And I think showing almost a social conscience in it, but also being able to talk about, why this is a bad thing and how it undermines, the efforts of good people. And I thought that was something that I could really sink my teeth into. And then I thought, what are just things that interest me? I used to be a big wrestling fan, and WWE is a big example of this, where they would always be the first to pat themselves on the back, and they would flout the great things they would do while being hypocritical and doing these terrible practices. Fast food is another example. So the documentary Super Size Me, non-for-profits like Susan G. Komen, that say, we're awareness for cures. So just little things like that, just that I thought, okay, these are little things, like little nuggets I could dig deeper into, and I could relate these to a larger idea. It shows my ability to link 3 or 4 different ideas. And then generally with my format, I would like to do a solution on things. I think you don't want to just sit on the fence. You want to say, okay, here's the different arguments. Here's what I think we should do. It adds a really nice, puts a little bow on your argument. And I thought, what's a solution of how we can ensure philanthropy is an entirely positive outcome? And I didn't quite get there. I would have liked a little bit more time, but I thought maybe discussing the importance of cynicism, right? And I thought that's something that no one would possibly ever write. And I think they'll know that, that would come through. So yeah, probably not fleshed out. And these were just some quotes that I found in an article that I liked. So, I mean, look, if you don't find writing super easy to start off with, because it's a hard process, I would really recommend this. Doing a little bit of finding things that interest you and what you can relate to them. I know Sarah I think Carl Fredericks was a guy that she was really interested in, and the world of fashion, about how like this kind of juxtaposition of like this glamour and beautiful world, but it has this really seedy underbelly. And it kind of got me thinking of, what are some of my interests that have a lot of nuance to them, and that you can really, because it makes the journey a lot more fun. So yeah, that's what I would recommend, guys. And that was kind of my thought process in the 10 minutes I went through this. And I didn't really get to a good conclusion. So I would have liked a bit more time, but anyway, and I'll stop sharing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think that I just wanted to give you a chance to see how Mark thought through that. Obviously, there is no one right way to do section 2, but if you were just completely overwhelmed, just to answer this question that's also in the chat, would you recommend doing untimed rewrites and conducting this research after seeing prompts? Or do you recommend having an area of interest that we commonly use? Either one is completely fine. You need to find what works best for you. So if you find that it's best to see the prompt first, go away and do some research, that's great. I find for some students, they do that and then the research doesn't benefit them next time. It's like, I only researched this prompt and it was like doing a school project. But then for others, it like opens their eyes, and maybe after what Mark just did, if you did something like that for this topic, then maybe next time you go to do a similar topic, you'll remember the same things. So regardless of what you're doing, pick something, like pick a process that each time helps you to know and to write about a little bit more and to approach it with more breadth and more depth and knowledge and understanding and a clearer idea of which way you would take it. So it's okay to do either way. I think untimed practice for section 2 is fantastic because it means you can explore things, and it's important to do both timed things to see where you're at and how you go realistically under the 30-minute time crunch, and then how you go in terms of just exploring and looking at different views. Yeah, no worries. One more question that I know a few people had was, will we get a chance to mark your essays? If you would like us to, I would encourage you to finish off what you started writing. If you didn't get a chance to save it, let me know, just email me and I can grab it out for you. When you've finished it, you can submit it through our marking service and we can cross-mark it for you and give you full video feedback and a rubric feedback as well. But in a couple of weeks' time, I think actually it's probably about a month and a half, we're planning on running a masterclass on section 2 only, and just going through lots of things that can be helpful for you if you're just starting out with GAMSAT section 2. And we'll have things like planning and coming up with ideas as well. So if you feel like you're just scratching the surface at the moment, then that's all good. That's where you want to be starting, and we'll take you from there. Cool. So I might pass on to Kevin now. Actually, before Kevin gets to talk to you all, I'll give you a chance to have a go at the questions. So we'll move on to section 3. For those of you who section 3 sounds brand new to, this is more of a science-based section, but with sort of a reasoning approach. So you'll have time to do 10 questions. I'll give you 20 minutes and answer them very similar to section 1. So they're multi-choice. And when you're done, we'll pass it over to Kevin and he will run you through some tips and some answers. So I'll just get a thumbs up when people have opened it and are ready to go. Cool, amazing. All right, good. People are ready. Okay, and I will share the timer again. And you can start. Again, amazing. So good job, you've finished everything. I'm going to pass over to Kevin now. He's one of our section 3 tutors, and he's going to go over some of the questions that you just did.
Well, good. Thanks, Sarah. Congratulations, guys. Hope that went well for all of you. So I'm just going to bring out the back end again, just like Molly did, so you guys can have a look at how the group went as a whole, basically. So can everyone see that okay, if I can get a thumbs up? Yeah, sweet. So as I said, well done, guys. These are some of the questions you got wrong. So first and foremost, does anyone have any questions that they particularly wanted to have a look at? So just smash that in the chat, or if anything. I just want to pretense this by saying this set of questions I really like because it highlights one of the things that I believe is pretty big for section 3, in that you don't necessarily need to know the content behind the question itself to answer the question. So with these stems, you can, for the most part, answer most of the questions without having too much background knowledge. And the main skills that really apply here are skills that I think are universal to section 3, which are, extrapolation of the key kind of main ideas, or extrapolation of what's important, and then also just self-confidence, backing yourself in attempting the question. So if no one has any particular questions they want to have a look at, how about we run through the questions that the cohort or the group got I think incorrect the most. So I think we'll start with question 1 and we'll move to question 3, and then we'll see how we go from there. If that sounds okay with you guys. Yep. So question 1 is basically asking you to apply some prior knowledge, and that prior knowledge is just that the basic formula for force is that force will be equal to mass times acceleration. The question wants you to realize that you're essentially dealing with the same formula as F is equal to M, force is equal to mass times acceleration, except it's written in a bit of a different way, in that it's just written here like that. So if I were to approach this question again, I'd basically split it up and go, okay, so they want me to find what acceleration is. I know force is equal to mass times acceleration. I have a force here, I have a mass here, and if I follow this grand scheme here, whatever's left is acceleration. So in this case, what the question wants you to have a look at, or what wants you to realize, is that when you split it like this, your acceleration essentially becomes v squared over r, which is in line with question or answer B. Is everyone cool with that? Also question 8 and 10. So is everyone following on for how that question went? All good? Question 8 or 10. Let's move down and have a look at that. So question 8 kind of builds up on the two formulas that you have above here. Question 8 basically says that inulin is a good indicator of GFR. So in that first sentence there, what the question is trying to get you to kind of connect is that whatever clearance rate that you get for inulin, it is the same as the GFR. From there on, it's quite similar to just kind of subbing things in. You don't really need to know what this whole clearance thing is. So let's start off with how I would approach it. So right off the bat, I know that I'm trying to look at the GFR, and the GFR is pretty much the same as the clearance rate of inulin. So from here, I try to be working out how to get to the clearance rate of inulin. So how do I do that? So if we scroll down to, I think here, we basically need to use this formula here. So this is the formula for clearance rate. And from there, once we know what we're looking for, we can start trying to find what's important. So do we know what the urine concentration of inulin is? We do, and that is right here. So we sub that in 120 milligrams per liter. Next up is, do we know what the plasma concentration is? And we know that too, which is here. So we sub that into the equation as well. We also know the volume of urine that comes out, and that is 120 mil, I think, in 1 hour. And so from here, I hope we can all realize that we've got the three constituents to work out what the clearance rate is. From here, it's all about just backing yourself and having the confidence to move forward. Something that I like to do is write out the units as such like this, because then it just makes it really easy to keep track of the units. So this is a big tip that I found really good. Write out the units like this. As you move on and as you progress through the question, you can see that you can just cancel out the units and you can not get confused. But another kind of caveat of this question is you look at the answers, and the answers are in milligrams per minute. So we have to realize that whatever unit we use has to match the answer. So there's no answer that has mils per hour. So we're going to have to change it to minute, so a minute scale. So that's why we just changed it, the 120 mil per hour, converted that to mil per minute. And then we've gone on the equation, the units cancel out. And if you simplify this equation down, you essentially get 120 milligrams per minute. Yes, so I do believe you get some working space on the online tests. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah. I do believe you can scribble around and highlight and do everything. So this kind of stuff is pretty much fair game for them to ask you. As well, what I find useful, use that, basic multiplications and stuff like that, write it out. Just makes it a lot easier when you're under a time pressure. Moving on to question 10. Is everyone okay with that so far? Yeah, we're all good. So question 10 is quite similar to everything you've done before. As I said, these questions are really good because you don't really need to know too much about the background, but if you back yourself, you can really get to these answers anyway. So question 10 is basically getting you to do pretty much the same thing, except it's getting you just to take it a step further and look a bit harder for the clearance rates or for the values that you're going to plug in. So in this question, what I like to do is, highlight the key things that you're going to plug in. So what do you need? You need the amount, the concentration in urine, concentration inside plasma, and then the volume of urine. So you have here over 6 hours, 600 mils of urine is produced. So you plug that back into the equation just like you've done before. Concentration of drug X is 120 micromolar. Again, plug that straight back into the equation. Concentration in urine. Plug that back in the formula. And now all you're left with is trying to find the plasma concentration. Now it says at 6 hours, they're trying to find the values at 6 hours. So what the question is expecting you guys to realize or connect is that you need to go to the graph, plug up to 6 hours, and you get your value of 20 micromolar. So what we're going to do is pretty much simple. I'm going to plug it back in again, and you're going to get this nice or unnice equation. And from here, what you're going to do is just going to back yourself, work through it step by step, and I guarantee you'll get the answer if you back yourself. So in this instance, we're going to plug in 20 micromolar from the graph down here. We're going to plug in the volume of urine, which is 600 mils in 6 hours. And we're also going to plug in the urine concentration. There we go. Again, write out the units so then you can keep track of it. So micromolar, they cancel out. And if you scroll down, can everyone see the bottom down here okay? Yeah. So if you cancel those out, what you're essentially going to get is 600 times by 600 mil per hour. A little bit confusing, but the answer, you might think, okay, my answer is going to be, what is it? 3,600 mil per 6 hours. What you also got to realize is, again, in the question stem, there's no per 6 hour unit of time. It's either in minutes or hours. So what I like to do is get the answer for hours first, just because it's one step easier. So 600 for 6 hours, you divide the volume by 6 for the time. You get 100 mil per hour, so you just get the volume per hour. You multiply that or follow the formula, you get 600 mils of clearance per hour. You check back on the questions or the answers. None of the answers match up, so okay, I'm going to have to change it to minutes. 600 mil per hour divided by 60, 10 mil per minute, and that is answer B. Did we follow that? All good? We're all good? Now, I'm a bit conscious of time. Did anyone want any particular other questions to be looked at? Not really. You guys will all get the answer sheet for all of these, and maybe just you'll get the answer sheet for all of these. So don't freak out if you don't know where you're going or you have tons of questions that you want to ask or don't want to ask here. You can also email me if you need. Basically, takeaways that I would get from these two questions, and for section 3 as a whole, is that don't feel like you need to know the background knowledge, because it's a never-ending hole and you'll never be able to know everything about all the questions they ask. What I find is the most helpful in preparing for section 3 is to gain some exposure and then work out a plan on how you're going to approach the question. So for instance, in these two stems, even though you might not know what the background information is, if you were able to realize that, okay, I needed to use the formula and I need to find the values and plug them into the formula. If you just worked out from there, that was how you approached it, you're already 80% of the question. You've already done 80% of the question. From there, it's just backing yourself, working through it step by step. So essentially, work out a process for everything, and then also back yourself, essentially, because you guys know more than you think. And the way the GAMSAT questions are cooked, it's to make you feel like you don't know where you're going, but if you work through it logically, you'll get there in the end. So if no one has any other pressing questions they want to bring up now, I'll hand it back to Sarah.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I completely agree with Jessica's comment about breaking it down step by step. And I said to Kevin, can you just give 1 to 2 general tips of what you think people need when they're first starting with section 3? And it's exactly what he just did of breaking it down step by step. And I would echo that as well. And just trusting that you don't need to know everything. So thank you so much. You've done it. Hopefully that was helpful to go through each of the sections and have a bit of a taster of them all. Well, what I would love you all to do is if you could put in the chat one thing that you got out of sitting this mini mock tonight, anything that you learned or something that you're going to try after this evening. And while you do that, I just have a few resources that if you don't really know where to begin might be helpful. Like I mentioned, I will post, when I send out this recording, I will post some of the strategies, sort of masterclasses that we've run. Those can be great places to start, and I'll pick some that can be helpful if it's sort of your first touch point. Pros, cons, and solution for section 2 essays. Yes, fantastic structure that you can use for your essays. Keep them coming. A great place you can start is with our ebook. It's free and it's very much a do it at your own pace, and it has some mock exams at the back, and you can sort of work through different modules and different tips. You can also join our Facebook community if you like, and actually we'll have quite a few more events coming up over the next few months that will be free, just like this one, no strings attached. Just come along and have a go at some GAMSAT content and learn something new every time, and just get a chance to practice things. And with that as well, we do have an interactive calendar if you want to sign up to it, and then you can be notified of it. So I think that's helpful if you're a Google Calendar user and you like that interface and want to be updated on what's going on. And like I mentioned before, if you would like your section 2 essays to be marked, absolutely, you can have them marked and sent to us. Our tutors put in a lot of care and thought to make sure they give you as much sort of constructive feedback as possible. Let's just read out some of these to finish off. If I learnt, we'll try putting it. Oh, I learnt to put it into the correct units. So section 3. Yes, thank you for giving that example with yours, Kevin. Very helpful tip. Brush up on some science prereq knowledge for section 3. Yes, I'll get to that in a second. One thing that you can do. Section 3, break it down, make it simple, and back yourself. Back yourself is huge. Please do back yourself, because absolutely, you will know enough. You'll have practiced enough by the day. You'll be fine. Identifying useful information in section 3 questions we need to use. Yes, practice that for section 3 and for section 1. For section 2, starting prep off with just idea generation. Yep, absolutely. And start off basic. If you don't know what to write. Yep, love it. And as always, we have, if you just like shout out to a friend, then we'll give you 10% off anything that is paid. But saying that you can come along to any free events and they'll always be free, and you can come along to more mini mocks. And like I mentioned, we have a section 2 workshop coming up as well. One more thing I will touch on, we haven't opened it yet, so stay tuned on our Facebook page, but we'll be running some what we call Head Starter courses. They're like mini courses, and those are a great place to start if you haven't sat the GAMSAT before and just want to try a course. They're only 3 weeks, and for section 3, they're especially helpful in helping you with all of that sort of content that you need to know without giving you all the extra stuff that you don't need to know. So Kevin's one of the tutors for that. And we also, like section 2, very similar. It sort of starts you off and holds your hand with all the little bits that you sort of need to set up section 2 without feeling like you have to start writing essays straight away. So both of those would be great courses I'd recommend after tonight, but you've got quite a while to think about it. They'll open in about 2 months' time, and we'll sort of email information and put it on our Facebook page. So I guess just one more thing that I would love you all to do. I've got a few links here, the ones that I just spoke about. Also just down towards the bottom is a feedback form. If you could fill it out, I would love that so much. It helps us to know how to create these events for you and make them as helpful as possible. And also I'll send out the explanations after this is all done and put up the recording for you. But also if you want to look at the explanations now, it's that final link there. So thank you so much everyone for coming along. I'm just going to play this video if it will work while you fill in the feedback form and make your way